the first defence of the America's Cup by the Royal Perth Yacht Club underway, the most talked about place in the West is Fremantle. And tonight's World About Us, a TVW-7 production, is about its history. In the 1820s, the first settlers arrived with a rather romantic vision of what Fremantle would look like, but the reality was less attractive and for some very disillusioning. The faith of the first governor, Captain Stirling, in the settlement did not waver, and he pleaded with the British government to improve the conditions for those early West Australians. They didn't. Convict labour was introduced into WA at the request of an influential few, large pastoralists, big merchants and publicans. It only lasted from 1850 to about 1865, but it did increase the size of the settlement from 5,000 to 30,000, and it did halve the wages of those already struggling settlers. The physical presence of the prisons was and is a focal point in the town of Fremantle. The port city developed around the wharf. The harbour, which operates so well today, is the result of the planning of C.Y. O'Connor, an exceptionally clever and far-sighted man who was misunderstood by the masses but supported by the great Lord Forrest. We're fortunate so many have fought to retain the old buildings of Fremantle because it is today a fine example of a port city in the Victorian style. It's a thriving place now, alive with the activity that surrounds the Cup. But even if the Cup doesn't stay, the charm that is Fremantle will.
Stand by to set the mainsail! Take away, south-southwest. Aye, aye, sir.
The challenge of the America's Cup. 11 men, the very latest in technology and that unbending determination to succeed. That same courage and commitment characterized the journeys of the early settlers more than 150 years ago. Just like the 12-meter yachtsmen of the 1980s, the seafarers of the 1820s put their faith in the totally unknown. That faith was based on a promise, the promise of a new life in a new land. The Dutch had made the trip more than a century before, naming the River Swan after the black birds that fascinated them. Led by Captain William Vlaming, the Dutch mounted various expeditions during their stay to determine the worth of this mysterious great southern land. But their reports were not as enthusiastic as those tended by Captain James Stirling in the late 1820s.
HMS Success was the vessel which carried Captain Stirling out to this area in 1827 to do the initial surveys of the area. He produced glowing reports about the river, about the land surrounding it, and about the harbour of Coburn Sound.
The literature that the settlers read reflected Stirling's romantic vision about what Swan River would look like rather than what he actually saw.
Even after such a long and dangerous journey at sea, the drama was not over for Captain Stirling and the new arrivals, for the tasks they now faced were simply daunting.
Immediately the protest came, and the Colonial Secretary's office files, the early files from late 1829 and early 1830, are full of letters from the settlers complaining about being led up the garden path, essentially. And so there was immense disillusionment, and the letters started to go back to England and were printed in regional and local newspapers.
It seems a complete burlesque altogether, not a farce, for they are generally laughable. But all here is really and truly criable. You will think I'm giving you a woeful description, but you, in England, can have no idea of what is going on here. Still, we live in hopes that something may turn out better.
As time went by, the beach at Arthur Head became dotted with tents and makeshift shelters. The adjacent dunes, stripped of their vegetation for firewood, soon turned Fremantle into a dusty, even more inhospitable shanty town. And with the blowing sands came drunkenness and general dissatisfaction. But from shaky beginnings, the settlement at last seemed to take some shape. But more help would be required if it was to reach its full potential. And so it was that in 1834, the British Undersecretary was visited by a very desperate Captain James Stirling. Word of the troubles at Fremantle had travelled quickly.
It is true that there are problems with the colony. Many of those who are seeking a new life have become dissatisfied. They have given up. More and more are leaving. We must act quickly to save Swan River.
Stirling was undeterred. His faith in the potential of Fremantle never wavered.
And so, gentlemen, I put it to you that it is not too late for the colony. I plead with you not to ignore the undoubted wealth that is there, and I request your assistance. With foresight and sense, I now believe, more firmly than ever before, that the colony will become a place of great importance.
The Undersecretary listened intently to Stirling, but his answer was typically non-committal.
Finally, Captain Stirling, we want to thank you for your proposal. The undeniable faith and hope you have reflected is, to say the least, impressive. I want you to know that my minister will fully consider what you have presented today, and that we will contact you in the future with an answer.
Stirling's plea was essentially in vain. Sure, they provided him with a strength and military presence, but none of the things the colony so urgently required was forthcoming. Clashes between the Aborigines and the white settlers had become commonplace. The Aborigines found the colonists would not share their valuable commodities the way they had been forced to share their fish and kangaroos. And it's sadly recorded that all Stirling did with his contingent of men was to ride south to the mouth of the Murray River and attempt to wipe out the people they called treacherous natives. Many Aborigines were imprisoned. Others fetched firewood for the settlers. Their world had been completely overturned. 10 years after the settlement of Fremantle, the Aboriginal population was riddled with alcoholism and other diseases. Today, the impact of their integration with the early settlers remains. In the same 10 years that saw the virtual decimation of these people, the colony advanced slowly under the burden of this and other problems, not the least of which was the rugged, unforgiving coastline.
The West Australian coastline does have onshore winds, and it has little in the way of havens for ships. So if a ship gets into trouble, it's difficult for it to find a place to avoid disaster. So they would go out in very dangerous conditions, and subsequently vast numbers of people were drowned. Effectively, they were sailing blind because there were no adequate charts to show where the reefs and other hazards were.
As the frequency of sea traffic increased, the reef-pocked waters claimed more and more vessels. Many a ship laden with goods and dedicated crew sank to a watery grave. Ship's logs and captain's notes, documents full of tales of mystery and adventure, of brave men and buried treasure. Tales recounting the triumphs and tragedies of sea voyages in the early 1800s. But of the gem and her crew, the story remains unfinished. It was about sunrise. The gem was heading in from the south with a favorable wind behind her. The weather was fine, the seas were smooth, all sails were set, and she was well clear of Rottnest Island's treacherous reefs. There were no signs of danger. Those on board the gem and the lonely man of the lighthouse had nothing to fear. Continuing on his morning routine, the keeper left his observation post to attend to other routine duties, and after a short time began the long climb upwards to the top of the lighthouse. But in his brief absence, something mysterious had occurred. Returning to his post, he looked out across the ocean, fully expecting to once again pick up the gem in his sights. He quickly became a worried man. The gem had simply disappeared.
Look what all the others are eating.
Why don't you have a bit of salad with that, mate?
Don't mind if I do, Gov. You can have a great barbecue at Pioneer World. I'll see you soon.
Quick, Papa, Papa is coming!
Bring out the good stuff, hurry!
The fresh ones, quick!
He won't pay that much.
When the Harvest Fresh Markets buyer goes shopping, he only buys the finest quality, freshest produce at the best possible prices.
Beautiful.
At Harvest Fresh Markets, the very best always costs less, and they're open 7 days a week.
If it's not the very best, it's not at Harvest Fresh.
Only a real estate is carefully planned around your children's education, local shops, recreation and easy access to the city. Park Lake Estate Balladura is the real estate. Ring Charter Realty on 364 5911.
There's only one place on earth where you can enjoy the wonder of Fremantle's Fishing Boat Harbour while intimately dining and dancing the night away, perched high above the water's edge. Where else but Lombardo's?
You got it all. Here at Fishing Boat Harbor. A paradise morning, noon and night. You got it all in Lombardo's. You got it all in Lombardo's.
We now present the results of tonight's lotto draw.
All on the bowl and homeward we are going.
Another chapter of Fremantle's colourful maritime history was opened when a barely equipped but nonetheless effective whaling station was established below the roundhouse. At the time, the biggest and most distinctive building in the settlement. The whalers, like so many farmers of the ocean that followed them, discovered and cultivated a living beneath the waves of the vast Indian Ocean. Their tools and methods were at first primitive, but in time a jetty was built, and by the 1840s, whaling was a booming industry. In a project undertaken by the local council, tons of earth were excavated in a bid to discover more about the layout and construction of the whaling station buildings on Arthur Head. Archaeologists came from all over the world to scrape and fossick in deep pits walled in by layer upon layer of history.
The object of the excavation is to define the limits of the historical material that we've got buried under the ground here. Fremantle City Council are redeveloping the area, and they want to make sure they don't disturb anything that's of cultural value.
Their findings were predictable. An 1851 penny, bottles, some buttons, many pieces of shattered china, and the tragic realization that much of what they were looking for would never be found.
Unfortunately, when we got down to bedrock here, we found it was under about 1.5 meters of water table. This is the base of the jetty, the beginning of the jetty. The rest of it, the part that we were really interested on, is possibly 100 meters further out to sea and gone for good now.
By the 1840s, other industries had sprung up in the port. The docks had come alive with activity as loads of wool and sandalwood were shipped out. Industry flourished, and soon portside business was booming. More and more ships pulled in, and an increasing volume of produce was shipped out. Today, Fremantle Harbour operates smoothly and efficiently. This outstanding engineering achievement is a fitting tribute to the foresight of one man. That man was C.Y. O'Connor, and he worked tirelessly in a bid to achieve his vision for Fremantle and the new colony. He worked under intense pressure and sometimes outright ridicule. He was considered mad, with outlandish plans that surely could never be achieved.
I think Western Australians have always had difficulty recognising talent in their own midst. And we tend to be a society which thinks first that talent lies outside Western Australia, and it always comes as a surprise to West Australians to learn that perhaps some pacemaking activities are taking place within Perth. So I think O'Connor generated ideas from within Western Australia, and I think these were found to be far-fetched. One could say that he had a very difficult time of it. Now, against that, I think one has to say that O'Connor was very strongly supported by the most powerful man in Western Australia, Sir John Forrest. There's no indication that Forrest wavered at all. Forrest thought big. He was a big man and he thought big. And he wanted to be remembered for producing great things for Western Australians. So I think O'Connor did enjoy a fair amount of very strong support. Now, whether that was sufficiently strong to assist him psychologically to survive the other criticisms, who can say?
The groundswell of opinion against O'Connor had depressed his staunch spirit to breaking point. His final diary entry reflects a feeling of anger and despair.
The Coolgardie scheme is all right, and I could finish it if I got a chance and protection from misrepresentation. But there's no hope for that now, and it's better that it should be given to some entirely new man to do. I feel that my brain is suffering, and I'm in great fear of what effect all this worry may have upon me. I have lost control of my thoughts.
O'Connor's death was a great tragedy, but his legacy was a remarkable one. His far-fetched schemes became realities, succeeding under the most difficult of conditions. And out of that success came a tough new breed of worker, the lumper.
The men who worked the wharves led tough lives, there's no question about that.
They were good, honest, hard-working, and very likeable people, very genuine. Couldn't find them any better on the Fremantle wharf of those days.
You had to be tough to survive. There is a myth about Australia that the essential Australian, the stereotype Australian, is an outback country person, tall, lean, bronzed, male, very independent-minded, fairly aggro, can do anything with a piece of wire, great improviser, has all those qualities. But in fact, to survive in an Australian town in the 19th and into the 20th century, you had to be pretty tough. And the city bred its own toughness.
You had to be fit and able to do the work, or you didn't get the job. That's all there was to it. The big fit and able men would get preference over the work because it was hard work in those days.
The men of the wharves earned the respect of the community, and Fremantle became a bastion of unionism. To this day, it remains a Labour Party stronghold. Men would stick together and strike together, and if anyone stood in their way, they would pay. April 1919, the word went out. The police were on their way to the harbour with scab labour.
But I remember that was on a Sunday morning that riot started. And the man come running with a kerosene tin, beating it through every street, calling the lumpers that, you know, were still in bed to get up and come to the wharf.
My father told me he was in it. He told me that they had to, trying to chase these national volunteers off the wharf. The police were sheltering them and trying to get them aboard the ships to work. and the Whoppies were trying to stop them.
Fremantle was just a fire with the lumpers and all that, and on the Monday night we were coming out from work. We used to come around the townway, and when we come down we saw the police on horseback coming up High Street and chasing the lumpers, and the Church of England had a fence around us. They were old-fashioned poles, narrow with points on the top, and every one of them was pulled off, beating the police with them. And we got frightened. We run back and come out the back way. We wouldn't go into town. We were that frightened.
Oh, well, there were sticks and stones and pickets and batons, and the police were interfering with them, and when they got near the scabs, they hit them with a baton. The police put the baton on them. And these Wharfies picked up blue metal or anything they could get. And they damaged a lot of policemen, but they never come on the wharf.
The riots witnessed many injuries, including the death of one young worker, Tommy Edwards, who was given a martyr's funeral, the biggest ever seen in Fremantle. The rift between the constabulary and the wharfies healed with the years, but the memory of the day known as Bloody Sunday lives on.
Here are some of the names and numbers behind Ahern's $5 million clearance sale. They're big names with small numbers.
25% off Playtex.
Here's another.
40% off Men's Country Road.
And another.
60% off Sango dinner set.
And another.
35% off selected Sheridan towels.
And another.
Stitches dresses from $49.
Ahern's $5 million clearance sale is on now. See the Sunday Times for new stock releases. And be quick.
Would you like one of these for only $6 a month? Yes, only $6 a month gets you this Supermobile garden bin. And listen to this. It's emptied 2 times each month. Compare this mess to a Supermobile garden bin. Sealed lid, neat and tidy, completely mobile, and that price again, only $6 a month. If you've got one of these, get one of these. Supermobile garden bins, only $6 and picked up twice a month. Phone this number now. Join the garden bin revolution.
Hey, look out, everybody. Here comes rock and roll to the rescue with a whole bunch of mighty fine albums from EMI. There's Talking Heads, Grace Jones, or the brand new from Duran Duran called Notorious.
Notorious.
Or how about Crowded House?
Hey now, don't dream it's over.
Their brilliant first up release called Crowded House. And there's great new albums from Rodney Rood, Glass Tiger, George Thorogood and Kate Bush. Yes, sir, it's rock and roll to the rescue.
The legend of Spain lives. Just 1 hour from Perth, all the adventure, excitement and fun of Spain is yours. See Zorro protect Spain. See the Andalusian stallions dance in splendor while the kids join Zorro on the water slides, toboggans, chairlifts and games. Escape with the family to El Caballo Blanco, Spain. Zorro!
By the middle of the 19th century, the conditions in the colony had again deteriorated. Many dreams of success had been washed up. Many plans had failed. What the colony needed most was a large, cheap labor force. Back in England, the British government desperately needed a place to accommodate the growing criminal population. And so in June 1850, the first cargo of convicts arrived in Fremantle waters.
The able young entrepreneurs of Western Australia got a tremendous boost by the presence of convicts and the injection of British money. So the population moved from 5,000 in 1850 to 30,000 or so 20 years later. A massive boost to the colony. It saved it, in fact.
But many of the people were not convinced that convicts were the answer.
At the time the convicts were sent, there was opposition. Most of the women of Fremantle and Perth were against having male convicts in Western Australia. They feared for their lives and their reputations. It was a very difficult thing for the women and children of the colony. Many of the male labourers didn't want convicts to come either because they knew that their wages would drop by 50% the moment the first boatload of convicts arrived, and that's precisely what happened. there was a shortage of labour in the 1840s, and that the Western Australians, to overcome a shortage of labour, asked the British government to send convicts to provide that labour. That implicates us all in the decision to bring convicts to Western Australia, but serious historical research has shown in the last few years that in fact only a handful of West Australians asked for convicts, and that handful were the large pastoralists and employers of the York area, the big merchants who had a vested interest in trade increasing from the presence of convicts, and from, as you would expect, the big publicans too. More convicts, more booze drunk, and the profits up and so forth. So the petitions to bring in convicts, in fact, only have a few names on them, but it was a very powerful lobby in London. Fremantle physically changed during the convict period, and it meant that wherever you were in Fremantle, you looked up at these huge structures of imperial authority. So if you were an ex-convict, you knew who ran Western Australia, and you lived under the shadow of the great jail. But this didn't intimidate all the convicts, and Fremantle's tradition of working class protest begins, I think, from this period.
By the 1860s, the British had established many other penitentiaries. The stream of convicts to Fremantle quickly dwindled. By 1865, the only offenders sent here were the unfortunate Irish political prisoners, the Fenians. Some years later, in an escape that had all the sophistication of a modern-day crime, 6 men escaped to freedom and a new life in the Americas.
A noble Welsh ship and commander was called the Catalpa, they say. She came out to Western Australia and took 6 poor Fenians away.
The escape started in the United States. Why these fellows were here, they came on the last convict ship, the Hougoumont, in 1868. And they were all political prisoners.
You kept them in Western Australia till their hair began to turn grey. When a Yank from the States of America came out here and stole them away.
The convicts were out on working parties all the time. The thing was, how the heck do you get them out? So they elected to send 2 gentlemen, Breslin and Desmond. It was Irishmen from the United States who arrived in Fremantle. So these guys had plenty of opportunity to find out who the convicts they were going to rescue were, and then make some contact with them. And they did this and let them know that help was coming. In the meantime, back in the United States, they'd found a brilliant sea captain named Captain Anthony. And they brought him a boat, which was the Catalpa, and they asked him if he would embark upon this journey of rescue, and he said he would.
So come on, you screw orders and gaolers, remember Perth regatta day. Take care all the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will steal them away.
And one day, looking up the shipping notes, at the approximate time appointed, they saw where the Catalpa had arrived at Fremantle. Captain Anthony was to come up here. Breslin had surveyed the sea the best off the coast of Rockingham. He was used to hiring the best coaches and horses in town. He would arrange for the prisoners to be out on work release. He would get them into the coach and horses. He had clothing prepared. And they would make their escape to Rockingham, which wouldn't be that difficult. Difficult, but not that difficult. The thing was that Captain Anthony had to have his boat crew ashore there waiting for them, then row them out, and they had to escape past Rocknest. This was all arranged. Captain Anthony paid his part. Breslin hired the best horses in town. He'd enlisted the support, of course, of other Irish ticket of leave men in town who were giving their support. He'd hired the best coach and horses in town, but they made a muck-up of it at the stables, and he got the worst ones. They'd hired them out for a regatta. So, or overnight, his plans, he was left without the fastest horses to the worst ones nobody wanted. But he still managed to have his, by good organisation and maybe a bit of bribery, I don't know, the 6 military prisoners were in a work gang, easily contacted, easily put in the horse and cart up in Hampton Road, and galloped off down to Rockingham with Breslin and Desmond.
Let's go. So come all you screw orders and jailers, remember Perth regatta day. Take care all the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will steal them away.
On reaching Rockingham, the boat was waiting for them. Captain Anthony had played his part.
Come on, lads! Come on!
They boarded the boat, and the watcher at Rockingham said, "What are you going to do with the coach and horses?" And they yelled out, "You can have it." So quickly the police were alerted that obviously some convicts had got away. The Georgette had arrived, which was our only steamer which used to ply between Albany and Fremantle, and the police commandeered that, and they took off after the Catalpa.
Armed with bold warriors, the Georgettes went out those poor Yanks to arrest. But she hoisted her star-spangled banner, saying, "You'll not port me, I guess."
They overtook the Catalpa, and they demanded that it surrender the prisoners it was carrying. The Captain Anthony just sailed on this. Obviously, he was going to pay no attention to them. They fired a shot across his bow and said, "Hand over the prisoners or we'll sink you." Captain Anthony then had to call their bluff. He hoisted the American flag, and all he replied was, "That flag protects me." Our fellows had a hurried conference on board and thought perhaps it was a bit big of us to take on the United States at that time. And we decided to let them go, and we pulled away, and they sailed on.
The Australian Women's Weekly $500,000 gold bullion giveaway continues.
There's another $500,000 gold bullion entry form in our super 258-page holiday issue of the Weekly. You'll love reading about the golden couple, Mr. and Mrs. Grant Kenny. Gay Waterhouse shows her love and resolve, plus exclusive souvenir photographs of the papal visit and Bob Geldof's wedding. For kids of all ages, there's 10 pages of things to do when there's nothing to do, and a review of children's pantomimes throughout Australia. For us mums, there's 16-page zip out of delicious holiday hits. There's gardening hints by Don Burke, Alan Searle and remarkably Richard Sterling, as well as your stars for 87. Plus 50 quick facelifts for your home. Wonderful royal doggy snacks. And for a great holiday read, we have 4 fabulous short stories. And I'll show you how to dress for the bush. And don't forget, this is your second chance to win the Weekly's $500,000 gold bullion sweepstakes. The more times you enter, the more chances you have to win.
The Super Summer Holiday issue of the Weekly, out now.
If you added up how many cloth nappies you soaked, washed, and hung out to dry in a year, you'd be surprised how many cloth nappies that came to. But Snuggler's nappies keep baby drier than cloth and help keep you away from the laundry. So next change to economical Snugglers and have more time for the things you'd like to do.
From Walt Disney Pictures, who brought you Bambi, Pinocchio, and The Jungle Book, comes a wonderful new adventure, The Great Mouse Detective, with Basil, the only mouse in all London who can save his queen and country from the clutches of the villainous Professor Rattigan.
Oh, I love it when I'm nasty.
Don't miss The Great Mouse Detective.
We've done it, old fellow!
More than a movie, a total experience. Ace Cinemas.
There's something about Fremantle that engenders respect for those who have been here before us. The architecture has become known and admired worldwide. It is regarded as a fine example of a port city in the Victorian style. And the fact that it is still intact and largely cohesive has astonished visiting architects.
They talk about it being unique. They talk about it being a miraculous survival. They talk about it being a place which is relatively unknown in architectural circles overseas. They wonder, just as you have, as to why it's still here and delight that it is.
The preservation of Fremantle has been due to the concerted efforts from various groups. But to understand its very special qualities, you need to go back to the early beginnings in the colony and to the jewel in the crown of Fremantle, the Roundhouse. It took 4.5 months to build and stands today as the most distinctive landmark in Fremantle. That it stands at all is due to the fickle winds of fate rather than the consciousness for preservation. For in 1922, a tender of £10 was asked for its demolition. But the harbour master objected, saying that his house next door would be blown away by the gale force winds. After the convict period, the progress of the colony languished. The imperial government held back vital funds, virtually strangling Fremantle's further development.
The trade was dull. The unemployed were standing around in both Fremantle and Perth. There was still the legacy of the convict period. Companies were going bankrupt, including the Stanley Brewery, later the Swan Brewery, almost went bankrupt. You wouldn't think that possible, but it almost did. And so it was a very difficult time. And by 1888, complete depression came over Western Australia. Crucial year.
But a sudden boost was on the way, and for the colony, it could not have come at a more opportune time. Gold. The irresistible temptation to find it brought thousands of hopefuls to Western Australia, and Fremantle shared in the prosperity of those hectic golden years. While the focus of the gold rush was hundreds of kilometres away in the goldfields of Kalgoorlie, it wasn't long before its effect was felt down the line here in Fremantle. There was, all over again, confidence and optimism. The place went through a major building boom, and its distinctive architecture is still overpoweringly evident today. By 1910, Fremantle was a thriving port and known as the gateway to the Golden West. The early convict buildings were now overshadowed by large emporiums, banks, offices, and stately homes.
In the rush of the 1890s, a lot of new facades were tacked onto old buildings. In fact, they're not total buildings, many of them. They are just facades with earlier generation of building behind. That was done in the 60s and 70s, when thoughts of preservation were very rudimentary, when it was a bold step forward to even consider keeping facades in order to maintain the streetscape and the townscape. It's, as you can see, a bit of a stage set left with new building going on behind it. It's happening in 2 or 3 places around the town. We're a bit concerned now, of course, that it might happen throughout the town and leave us with a complete stage set rather than the guts of the town.
Hollywood? Well, not exactly. Fremantle's a long way from Beverly Hills. But in 1935, a would-be mogul created an epic entitled Secret Agent. The fight to ensure Fremantle remains relatively untarnished by progress has been somewhat less humorous.
There is a long history of times when Fremantle was about to be bulldozed and rebuilt. And for various economic circumstances, wars and depressions, it missed out on that great development boom that's gone through most of our other cities and left us intact.
Many residents feared the arrival of the America's Cup would signal the departure of Fremantle's character.
Oh yes, they've done a lot since Bondi won the cup. And there used to be a Muse's boat shed just down a few streets. Well, that's all gone. See, it's all into the Fisherman's Harbour now.
I never thought, and I said to the associates that I knock about with, I said, if Bondi wins this race, we'll be well in it. And I didn't expect it to be the magnitude it is, though. I thought it'd be about half as good as it is now. But it's more than I expected, far more than I expected. I didn't expect to be knocking old places over and building new places and rejuvenating old places. Look at the Esplanade Hotel. Have you been down there to see that? That was a tuppenny halfpenny joint until Bondi won that race. And Fremantle, one-way streets, every other goddamn thing now, since they started. So I never expected this, never.
There has been tremendous pressure on the place in the last 12 months. It's done a lot of good in the sense of encouraging people to smarten themselves up and tidy up their premises. There's been a lot of painting done, a lot of refurbishing of interiors and so forth to very good effect. It's had that influence. I think the danger could be that it goes too far, too fast perhaps. Fremantle is a slow-moving place. This is why we've still got so much of it left.
What we are seeing is the sort of renewal in Fremantle that to some extent we saw in the 1890s and 1900s, a tremendous burst of building activity which frightens some, dismays others, and excites still more. And I think that it is too early, here I am the cautious historian, to say whether all this flurry of activity and injection of capital is going to harm Fremantle in the longer term. I have a suspicion that it won't, and that Fremantle will not only survive, but prosper magnificently.
The afternoon is just drifting by. There's a fascinating sparkle in her eyes. As time goes by, you see spirits set free. The Celanese princess play in the field. The painter from Spain is at it again. And a rock and roll minstrel has fanned an old flame. It's amazing the things that you see when you set your spirits free.
Kirk's quality mixers from the people who make Coca-Cola.
Large crowds or small, Kentucky Fried Chicken Catering caters for all from just $2 a head. Just call Kentucky Fried Chicken to enjoy the convenience of the Colonel's extensive catering service anytime, anywhere.
There's only one place in the world where you can enjoy the wonders of Fremantle's Fishing Boat Harbour while quenching your thirst at any one of 3 distinctly different bars, high over the water's edge. Where else but Lombardo's?
You got it all. Fishing Boat Harbor, a paradise morning, noon and night. You got it all in Lombardo's. You got it all in Lombardo's.
Wednesday night, Channel 7 premieres a brand new television series, a show where anything can happen, and usually does. International personality Noel Edmonds presents The Late Late Breakfast Show. 60 minutes of fun, variety and sheer madness. So spark up your life with the most surprising mixture of entertainment and personalities with The Late Late Breakfast Show. 8:50 Wednesday night on Channel 7.
Fremantle was thousands of miles from the front line. It didn't take long for the effects of World War I to get here. Many men, some of whom never returned, passed through this port on the way to war. And of course, Fremantle men had to leave wives and families behind to take up arms for their country. It was left to the women to shoulder the responsibilities. And they played a vital behind-the-scenes role in a conflict that worried the entire world.
They were doing a mighty job, the women. They were doing a mighty job because they took the place of a lot of men. In driving trucks and things like that, the women did a lot of that during the war years, and I think that was the start of the women being what they are now.
Oh, the troop ships used to leave Fremantle, and that's you could go down and see them off, but that's all there was. All the soldiers passing through. But there was no excitement much about it. Oh, because we were young then, we didn't fear anything. We never thought of the war.
Although the possibility of invasion was remote, Fremantle was enveloped in a fear of war that still exists today. By the end of the First Great War, that fear was followed by hard times and eventually the Depression.
Oh, why don't you work like the other men do? How the hell can I work when there's no work to do?
No one was spared from the devastating effect of the Depression. The queues for work grew and men struggled to feed their families.
Often I'd go down there for days at a time and never get a job. 3 times a day. And you could take on I'd take on any work that was offering, and a lot of fellas wouldn't work coal. And I earned most of my money on the waterfront on coal, working coal. But a lot of people wouldn't have it on because it was dirty. But I would do anything, as long as I got paid.
The proudly independent wharfies were now forced to endure humiliation at the hands of the man in the bull ring.
You would all stand in a ring. He would stand in the middle, and everybody facing him.
You.
If he didn't like you, he would make it deliberate.
You.
He'd pick up the man on the left-hand side of you, and then he'd pick up the man on the right-hand side. And he'd leave you there, standing. They had the power of, well, let's say life and death. And if you got the job, then good. If you never got a job, well, then there was no pay.
While World War I was remote and perhaps at an age when the armed conflicts of the world was considered a romantic notion, World War II was closer and more threatening. For the first time since Stirling ordered trenches dug around that 1829 settlement, Australians were considering a home front.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special bulletin from the newsroom. Japanese naval, military and air forces launched widespread attacks without warning yesterday morning on British and American territories in the Pacific and on Thailand. The sudden onslaught was apparently designed to achieve knockout blows. Bombers raided Singapore, the central point for British forces in far eastern waters and the city regarded as Australia's northern fortress. Fears now exist that the Japanese may focus their attention on Australian shores.
Up and down, up and down. As we went forward, we passed the native stretcher bearers bringing the wounded back. Oh, well, at least we wouldn't have to walk back. Like meeting your future face to face.
The Second World War saw Fremantle become an important strategic naval base for the American fleets.
They put all their guns ashore, and as they put their guns ashore, they mounted them right along the wharf, in between the sheds, because they thought the Japanese would be coming down, and they were ready for it. The Americans, all Americans, and the wharf was lined up with guns. You had to get a pass to get on the wharf in those times because, well, sabotage, I suppose they expected, but you had to get a pass to get on the wharf. If you didn't show your pass, you didn't get on.
The arrival of the American forces boosted the local economy, and for the first time, U.S. troops walked the streets of Fremantle.
Yes, the Americans, see, they came here. The soldiers come first and then the sailors come after. And of course, the girls went mad with the sailors.
But that wasn't the last of the Americans, and Fremantle remains one of the most popular shore leave destinations for the U.S. Navy.
I think the fear that an overseas or foreign power might do something in this part of the world goes back a very long time. And of course, latterly, the perhaps growing confrontation between the Americans and the Russians and the knowledge that West Australians have that the submarines of both powers are operating off Fremantle shows that we have a very long history of being, I think, concerned about what foreign powers might do to us. And it's just ingrained in Western Australians to be concerned, to on the one hand welcome the existence of a big friend, and on the other, to be worried about the implications. I think that goes back as far as the beginning of Fremantle.
And those early fears of invasion have manifested themselves in anti-nuclear sentiments. Today, the visiting fleets are greeted with a mixture of open arms and angry protests.
I think that the stakes are much higher these days in terms of the capacity of international powers to wreak destruction on a place like Fremantle. But we have to live with Fremantle, in Fremantle, around Fremantle, just as generations of Western Australians had to do, with that possible knowledge that one day it could be the scene of a major catastrophe in international affairs.
All either side needs is one Poseidon submarine. They got 50,000 warheads, which they do not need. They have to start to go. The arguments that you give me are no longer valid. We've been hearing those arguments for the last 25 years, and we are now on the precipice of extinction.
It's a debate that will probably never be fully resolved. The peace movement will continue to highlight Fremantle's role as a part-time shelter and holiday home for the visiting American fleets. They will point it out with the same vehemence and faith that the American and Australian governments use when they're refuting that Fremantle is a military target. No one, but no one will ever know whether they're right or wrong, except if that day, that fatal day, becomes a reality.
Class, style, sophistication. Rex Harrison. Elegance, beauty, charm. Claudette Colbert. Together on stage, two living legends with a magnificent international cast. Rex Harrison, Claudette Colbert. You feel a glow just thinking of them. Now you can see them in Aren't We All at His Majesty's Theatre. Book now at theatre and usual outlets.
Smile, 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 a Pacific smile.
You'll smile a Pacific smile with this fantastic offer from your Target chemist.
Smile, a Pacific smile.
Target chemists give you 24 big glossy Pacific photos for just $11.99. That's up to 24 big Pacific photos for just $11.99. Now at your Target chemist. Pacific, terrific. Pacific, developing Australia.
At last, a clean, neat alternative to that ugly garden bag, the Supermobile Garden Bin. And guess what? It's only $6 a month, but it's emptied fortnightly. Believe it, you can join the garden revolution for only $6 a month. You may have seen this brochure that shows that Supermobile Garden Bins are neat, clean, sealed, bug-proof and weatherproof, plus can be wheeled anywhere you have garden refuse. Compare. Do you want this for $6 a month or one of these for only $6 a month? Phone now to order yours.
Let's Calippo! Ooh, baby, come with me and do the Calippo. It's such a simple move, the Calippo dance.
First you shimmy down.
Fruity and juicy, natural Calippo.
So refreshing.
Do the Calippo dance.
Then you shimmy up.
Orange and lemon. Come on and do sweet Calippo now.
Let's Calippo!
Now, all natural passion fruit Calippo.
These people have come to our country knowing that hard work and a democratic way of life will pay dividends in terms of happiness and security.
For many immigrants, Fremantle was their first taste of Australia, their first port of call, and many elected to stay and start their new lives here.
Well, I think it's very important to understand that Fremantle has always been an immigrants' society, that waves of migrants have given Fremantle its character, and it is a recognisable character. It is distinct from Perth, there's no question about that. It is probably in Australia now quite unique in its social and ethnic mix, and the fact that it's a port, I think, has helped enormously.
Since the 1920s, migrants from Central and Southern Europe, and particularly Italy, have made their way to the port city. They brought with them a long tradition of seafaring, and through their skills and experience, Fremantle's fishing industry was born.
Well, when I came here, I remember there couldn't be more than about, say, 15, 20 boats altogether. If you could take in what the industry, the fishing industry, has brought to Fremantle, it's enormous. More than any bloody wool and the weight they got here.
Fishing for local and export markets has become a major part of Fremantle and still thrives as one of her most important industries today. The impact of various migrant groups on the port will never be erased. There is an unmistakable multicultural atmosphere in Fremantle, and even the latest, if only temporary migrants, are wielding an influence as the port gears for the greatest number of visitors ever seen.
On the morning of the 27th of September 1983, the fishermen must have realized they were in for some company in their cozy little harbor. Well, there may have been an expectant smile or even a shudder, but few of them would have counted on the magnitude or the type of transformation their harbor was about to undertake. And while they wondered, the whole of Australia, from the Prime Minister down, launched a gigantic celebration.
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up the day is a bum.
Fears that the working class fabric of Fremantle would be lost in a search of big dollars have gone. The cup is with us, and the effects are evident.
Now there's a different atmosphere in the whole city, everywhere. There's just a new energy, a fresh energy, a vitality about it. And that, I think, is exciting.
The general run of things is, the boat race, the boat race. That's all they're concerned about.
Well, the big spending entrepreneurs are certainly present. I would contend that Fremantle has always had some big spending entrepreneurs. What we're seeing, of course, is the possibility that the big spending entrepreneurs could engulf some of the traditions of Fremantle, both the physical traditions in terms of the buildings we see in Fremantle and the cultural, social traditions as well, by the ethos of the success ethic dominating all. Whether it works out that way, I think, is a little too early to say. Fremantle does have a sort of sponge-like ability to absorb new influences without being totally transformed. And some of the large entrepreneurs have very strong historical roots in Fremantle itself.
And so life goes on for the real people of Fremantle. The artists, the fishermen, the wharfies, the collection of cultures that represents the port city today.
Just as the fishermen could not comprehend the changes that were to come when Australia too ended the longest winning streak in the history of sport, it's hard to imagine how Fremantle will be in mid-1987. By then, the yachting syndicates will have taken their millions of dollars of equipment and technology back with them. If Australia is successful in defending the Cup, they'll be back soon again, you can bet your life. If not, Fremantle will have at least earned itself a brief berth in world headlines and a prominent place in yachting history books. It will most definitely be a different place for the experience. Just how different is difficult to determine. But whatever the outcome, it's the youngsters of today that'll be shaping the Fremantle of tomorrow.